Good morning, everyone. I'd like to say welcome to all of you to the webinar being hosted this morning, Off the Beaten Path, Rural Energy and Remoteness. This is being hosted by the Smart Villages Initiative and also with the LCEDN, the Low Carbon Energy for Development Network. We're very pleased to welcome you this morning. And we have quite a few interesting speakers for you. This morning we'll begin with Julia McDonald, and she is an engineer working quite a lot on remote islands, and she's going to be talking about Tuvalu this morning, or afternoon or evening, as we do have a global audience today. Next we'll have Paris Lumba, who's an entrepreneur in the Himalayas, based in India right now. We'll have Colin, who's the head of Department of Energy Studies at Mzuzu University in Malawi. We'll also have Ben Campbell, an anthropologist working in Nepal, based at the University of Durham. And lastly, we'll have Stuart Crane, who's the managing director of Village Infrastructure Angels, who has a long history of energy entrepreneurship and working on islands. So as you can see this morning, we're going to have a bit of a mix of islands and mountains, and we're going to talk quite a bit about remoteness. And as well, we'd really like to invite you to please send your questions during the session and tell which presenter the question is directed to. That'll help us to assign those questions. And at the end of the session, after all of the panelists have spoken, we'll have a Q&A session and answer some of these questions. So please do stay in touch with us during the course of the webinar. And also, my colleague John Cloak, who's one of the co-organizers, is also going to send you all a question, and he would love to hear your feedback on that question and maybe a couple of others during the course of the webinar. Also, the PowerPoints will be available on our website and also on the LCEDN website, and there will also be a recording of the webinar available then. Also, you'll see that we have two handouts, and one of these handouts is our policy brief about islands, which my colleague Mike Price wrote, and as well we have a new infographic, and this is about islands and remote areas and what some people's ideas of an ideal kind of smart village in these areas might be. And we'd love to have your feedback on any of these as well, or questions. And just here at the very beginning, I'd like to do two really quick polls, if that's all right with you all. So what I'm going to do first is I'd just like to know a little bit about what's your profession and your field of work. So I am just going to launch that, give you guys a few seconds to vote on that. As you can see, this is researcher, scientist, academia, policymaker, government, entrepreneur, nonprofit, NGO, INGO, and the private sector. I'll just give you all a few more seconds to finish that. I can see that about 2/3 of you all have responded to that. So great. I am just going to close that poll and share that with you all, just so you have a little bit of an idea of who the audience is this morning. So yeah, there we've got about 1/4 who are from academia, and around anywhere from 10 to 13% for entrepreneurs and government and policymakers, 1/3 from nonprofits and NGOs, and about 21% from the private sector. Okay, and I'm just going to do one more quick poll. And this is about where you live. So we're pretty curious about where you're calling in from. I was a little limited in the number of spaces, so for Asia, I did have to combine all of South Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, so apologies for that. I'm just going to launch this poll really quickly and give you guys a few seconds to answer that. So if you're based in North America, you're up quite early this morning. If you're in Asia, good evening to you. And for those of you in Europe and Africa, good morning, or perhaps it's lunchtime for you. All right, that's great. So we have 11% in Africa, about 55% in Europe, 34 or 33% in Asia, and great. Okay, so I'm just going to close that poll, show you guys those results. So I think it's a bit too early for our colleagues in North America and South America, but we're very pleased to see that number of people in Africa, Europe, and Asia. All right, wonderful. So I think what we'll do here is go ahead and launch into the presentation of Julia McDonald, who's going to talk with us this morning about Tuvalu. And it should be quite interesting. I have heard her speak before, and she was also featured in a Smart Villages video recently. So I'm going to turn that over to Julia. So please take it away, Julia.
Thank you, Molly, and good evening, afternoon, or morning to everybody, wherever you are, for dialing in. I'm going to do a presentation on a very small island country called Tuvalu in the South Pacific, and it'll be a case study of some of the energy challenges they have there. So as a brief introduction to my company, I work for IT Power. We have global offices all over the world. I work in the Australian office, and we are most active in Australia and the Pacific region. So this is a map of Tuvalu. Tuvalu consists of 9 islands, of which 8 are inhabited. As you can see, it's spread over a very large area. So this is the main island, Funafuti, and this is the northernmost island, Nanumea, which is about 500 kilometres away. So about 6,000 people live on the capital. Other islands have a population of between 100 and 1,500 each. The outer islands are only accessible by boat, and typically it takes about 24 hours from the main island to get to each one. Shipping's very irregular. They've got government ships that do rounds of the islands, but those only go approximately every 3 to 6 weeks and not necessarily on a regular schedule. They've also got a lot of problems with shipping being disrupted by weather or by a boat being out of action. So my case study will be of a renewable energy project that we recently worked on in the northern islands of Tuvalu. Those are the ones that are furthest away from the main island. So to give you an introduction to the existing situation there, all of Tuvalu's main islands have electricity grids, and they've been running on diesel generators since 2001. They have an electricity utility called Tuvalu Electricity Corporation that manages those grids. On each of the outer islands, they'll have local operators who are employees of the utility to deal with the day-to-day running, and then they have from the capital, who are usually more highly trained and skilled, who will visit periodically and do major repairs when needed. So just to clarify the type of island situation that I will be talking about, where there is already some existing power available, whereas some of the other presenters will be talking about situations where there's no electricity available at all. So why move to renewable energy? Well, because, as I've mentioned, there are many, many logistical problems with accessing these islands. The island government's very keen to reliance on imported diesel, which costs the government a lot of money, reduce their running costs, have a cleaner and quieter source of energy, and also to improve reliability, which has been in the past very poor on the outer islands. The downsides, of course, are that the upfront costs can be quite high, storage is needed so that they can have power at night, and they can sometimes have integration problems with the generator. So this is one of the reasons, as I've mentioned, why they're looking to move to a renewable energy solution. As you can see from this graph, generators don't operate very efficiently in the lower range, at lower load, and on most of these islands, because they are a relatively small village, at certain times of day the loads are actually very low and the generators typically don't run very efficiently, which increases the cost of generating electricity. This is just an image of some of the old generators on the Northern Islands. As you can see, this is actually a 100 kilowatt generator, but the island's normal load is only around 20 kilowatts, so that generator has been running very inefficiently. And this is an image of the old power station before the renewable energy system was put in. And this is just an example of some scenes from the village. So this is a more traditional type of building or house, and you can see in the background there are also more modern kinds of concrete and brick houses with tin roofs. So one of the things that we have to think about for these type of islands is what people actually want to use the energy for, and it's not always, the priorities are not always what you think they might be. So as you can see in this picture, when the power system people had the opportunity to think about what they actually wanted to do, and one of their priorities was actually putting in these floodlights so that they could play tennis at night, which might not necessarily be something that you would imagine as a priority. Large speakers for some of the buildings on the island were also quite a high priority item, so we needed to take those into account when thinking about the power supply. So these are just a list of some of the key issues for the Northern Islands of Tuvalu. Reliability was a major problem. Normally the islands would operate between 12 and 18 hours a day, but that does depend on the weather and the shipping schedule, and they did go down to 2 to 4 hours a day sometimes when there were diesel shortages. Diesel shortages are pretty frequent because of the unreliability of the shipping, and because sometimes due to the weather they just can't get boats out there. Generator breakdowns are also quite common, and there's a very long delay for repairs because it can take weeks to send a technician and even longer for spare parts. Cost of generation is very, very high, and it's partly because of the low efficiency and breakdowns and these kinds of things, and partly because of the difficulties of getting things out to the islands by ship. So the islands are pretty vulnerable to diesel price changes, and they're also vulnerable to cash flow issues with the utility, which is a problem because it's a very small utility. The other issue is that tariffs on the outer islands are subsidised. They're only paying 25 cents a kilowatt hour, while the cost of generation is up around $1.20 to $1.50 a kilowatt hour. So there's a big financial burden to the government who's subsidising the tariffs. And this also means that in general they need fuel subsidies from other donors from outside in order to be able to maintain the fuel supply. So to summarise what the situation is, the remote diesel grids were built by the government as a service to the community because they wanted to provide electrification to the remote islands, but they proved to be very expensive to run, and it's difficult for them to maintain reliability out there. So that's why they've been looking at a renewable energy solution to reduce their reliance on the diesel. Transportation, as I've mentioned, is a big issue. Most of the islands don't have proper wharfs or ports. So this is an example. You can see there's a reef, and there's a channel cut through the reef, and the ship has to sit outside the channel. They then unload all of the cargo onto small boats that run in through the channel, and things are unloaded by hand. This is an example of equipment and cargo being unloaded by hand in the water, and this is how everything gets on and off the island. So this is a pretty major challenge, and diesel also has to get unloaded in this way, and of course there's a risk of the diesel falling in the ocean and causing contamination as well. And this is another image showing, this is actually solar panels being unloaded from, oh sorry, it might be racking, being unloaded from the main boat onto the small boat for transportation over the reef to the island. Vulnerability to weather is also a problem. These are some images from a cyclone last year that impacted the Tuvalu Northern Islands. The cyclone didn't actually come very close to the islands, but there were major storm surges, and because they're so low-lying, being only 2 to 3 metres above sea level generally, there was a lot of damage caused. So in this picture you can see that the loading ramp was actually destroyed, and the unloading channel was actually filled with sand and rocks, and that meant that it was impossible to deliver anything, and it also made the rescue effort quite difficult for some time until they were able to clear that channel. So the aims of the solar project for the outer islands were to achieve 100% renewable energy on the islands, to achieve 24-hour power rather than intermittent power, to last 20 years without need for major modifications, and importantly to reduce the operating costs for the outer islands power systems and to improve the power reliability and the availability during disasters. This project was grant funded because it was quite capital intensive, and in the long term the aim is to eliminate the need for fuel subsidies from aid and other donors. This is an example of a load curve for Nanumea Island. Establishing what the loads on the island are going to be can be a little bit difficult, but because there was an existing power system on this island, we did have some data from a data logger. We then had to assume that there would be some load growth, because usually when you go from unreliable power to a more reliable power supply, there will be an increase in the appliances that people buy, particularly things like freezers, which are quite desirable in these tropical islands. This is another example of a load curve from a different island, and it's interesting to note here that the records from the power station written logs don't actually line up very well with what was recorded by the data logger. So the load estimate we came to was 550 kilowatt hours a day. Not a lot of seasonal variation, but there were some busy times like Christmas and special events. We made allowance for 2 days of extra with poor sun, just to make sure that the generator isn't needed very often. And this is used to size the battery bank and then the solar PV array. This is a diagram showing how the whole system was connected together. As you can see, there is still a backup generator, and they actually reuse the old generators. But so far, the generators have only actually been run once in the past 9 months since this system went online. The main features that we were looking for, because it's such a remote location, are that the components are modular, so that if one unit fails, you can still have most of the system online, and that there would be spares kept on the island so that they could swap out one of those units if they need to. The products were off-the-shelf products, so that new ones can be ordered and warranty replacements aren't too much of a hassle. However, it does take a very long time to do a warranty replacement just because of the shipping and the difficulty of getting things out there. We also require the system to be robust and very corrosion resistant, because it is right next to the ocean in the tropics, and it needed to be a cyclone-proof structure for the same reason. The building needs to have no air conditioning required, because that's usually one of the first failure points in these environments, and the system needed to be low maintenance. So this is an aerial shot of the completed system, which just shows you the size of the system. We can see the old power station is here, and then the new battery and inverter house is just here. This is an image of the display unit, which the operators can use to see what exactly is happening with the system, what the loads are, what's being generated by the solar, and then what's being produced and put into the batteries. This is designed to make it relatively easy for the operators who might not have a particularly high skill level on the outer islands. This shows the modular inverter charger units, quite a lot of them, and the idea of these is that if one of them goes offline, you can continue operating the system without it, and you don't actually completely lose power. This is the battery room. The batteries are sealed batteries that don't require topping up. This is also a feature that should reduce the amount of maintenance that's needed. Passive cooling systems, no air conditioning, so you can see there are vents in the side of the building and also fans in the top of the building. That just operates naturally, and so far the temperatures inside the building haven't been excessively high, so the system seems to be working quite well. And the system's been online for around 9 months now, and in general no diesel is needed because the system has been designed to be quite large to allow for some load growth. So normally the batteries drop to about 80% overnight, and then before midday they'll be charged up again. So there's quite a lot of redundancy in it, and they can go for 5 days of cloudy weather without needing the generator. So far they've had one inverter failure, and the local operator was able to replace it and send it back to the main island for a warranty claim. Training and operation is always one of the most difficult aspects of these remote islands. The local operators were involved from the beginning of the construction period, and they received training throughout the construction and troubleshooting. And the other staff on the main island had been doing solar training for a longer period, so they are able to adapt better and have support from the manufacturers. Usually it's very challenging for outer island operators to adapt to the new technology because their skill level is not very high. This is a problem that tends to in all countries where there's a main island and then there are some remote islands, and generally they do need a lot of support from the head office. So the way that the system is operating at the moment is that the operators in the outer islands basically monitor everything, and they do basic repairs if they can. Most of the time, if something else has gone wrong that they don't know how to fix, they just call the head office if they can, because communications don't always work very well. but they'll call the head office for support, who will talk to them over the phone or eventually come out and visit if they need to.
Hi, Julia. It's Molly here.
Hi,
Hi, if I may just jump in, I'd just like to remind people to send their questions to us about your presentation. We will have to move on to our next speaker. Your presentation is so interesting, so I hate to have to move on, but we'll need to move on to Paris Limba. Okay, thank you so much.
That's the end anyway. I just came to the end, which shows some lessons and challenges.
Fantastic, fantastic.
So, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Julia. Okay, wonderful. Well, next we're going to move to Paris Lumba, who's working. He's based in India right now, but he's working quite a lot in the Himalayas. He's an entrepreneur, and his work is quite interesting as well. So I'm just going to change the presenter over to Paris and give him the floor. And that should take just a second. All right, Paris, are you ready to start?
Yes, thanks, Molly. Right from the sea level to 15,000 feet. Good morning to all of you. This is the Himalayas. I'm Paris Lumba, and I'm the founder of Global Himalayan Expedition. We actually conduct annual leadership and volunteer expeditions to the Himalayas to electrify remote villages. And as you can see, the presentation is more going to be about the pictures and stories and a journey on how do we go about doing our business. So Himalayas, why Himalayas? They are the roof of the world, and almost 50% of the population of it is in the Himalayas. It has the highest solar radiation, so a perfect place to set up solar projects. And of course, one of the most sustainable and the most oldest traditions of the world. It's very physically challenging, but I must say it's eternally satisfying for us to do what we are trying to do. We currently operate in the northernmost part of the Himalayas, or northernmost part of India, called Ladakh. Very strategically located. Two good friends, one Pakistan, left-hand side, right-hand side, China, but very safe, I would say. And that is where we are currently operating. This area actually has more than 200 off-grid villages, and I think almost 50 to 60% of these villages are very, very remote, which are not even approachable by roads. So you need to trek for days and days to get to these villages. Well, what do we do actually? So GHE, through our leadership and through our volunteers and through our local people, we provide clean energy and education access to these communities, but we also focus largely on livelihood creation. So once we use energy access as a tool, we go ahead and create livelihood creation in terms of jobs and in terms of opportunities through handicrafts and tourism. We are also focusing a lot on the clean technology by setting up centers on that. IEEE Smart Village, another smart village I must say, is a big supporter of what we're trying to do, and of course we support the United Nations goals as well. We started initially in the year 2013, and we set up something called a third pole. Third pole refers to Himalayas. Third pole education base. It's set up in Ladakh at 12,500 feet. It basically provides cross-cultural and cross-geographical learning to students. You see a slide here where students from school in Ashley, UK are talking to the students in the E-base in Ladakh. We also went ahead and developed the sustainability curriculum, the first for Ladakh, where students come and talk about things outside their academic and focus on the experiential sustainable curriculum. They set up greenhouses. You see them setting up biogas plants and stuff, which is very, very focused towards their ecosystem. To sustain this, to make sure that things are in order, we conduct E-based fellowships. So now we have 3 fellows who come to the E-base, stay there for 3 to 4 months and conduct these classes, and there's an impact that is measured. What we realized that these students, these kids in this E-base came from multiple villages, and we got to know from them that these villages are totally in darkness. So our focus shifted from education largely to electrification, and that's how we moved into the field of clean energy. We trekked and raked a lot of villages in Ladakh in the last 2 years, and we came up across a decentralized solution, which is called solar DC microgrids or nanogrids based on the capacity. These are very safe proof. No one gets a shock. So assuming someone getting a shock in those high mountains and there's no medical center nearby, it's a bit of a challenge. So it's very easy to install. So anyone who comes on our expedition can easily get an understanding on how to set up a solar power plant, let's say. And we initially provide lighting loads like a 3-watt LED lights with very light humans, but we go ahead and also provide other appliances on DC if the villagers want to upgrade their lifestyles and there's an economy development in the village. So whatever we do, there is a process we follow, right from education to mobilization to making sure the local leadership knows about us, to make sure the maintenance of the grid is there. There is a proper scalability of the grid. There is proper reporting of the grid as well as an impact assessment. Most of our funding, besides crowdfunding through expeditions, we also get CSR funding from multiple players as well as agencies, development agencies. So we provide the initial investment through these people into the village to set up grids. Once the grid is set up, we revolve around tourism and handicrafts to upgrade the economy, where we also survive and sustain, and also making sure the villagers earn something out of it. So when we start finding villages, we normally use local contacts because there is no database, there is no survey available at these remote villages. Actually, these villages are not even on Google Maps, so it's not even, no one can even know about it, where they are. So you need to find a trek route and recce them. So going through roads which are not even made, through passes, crossing rivers like this. There's an Indus River here. We reach these villages. Very important to create awareness, make sure why they need solar. They need to move out from oil. These villages are not so big. They're very small, but they're very ancient villages. They are almost like 2,000 years old villages. So there is a civilization there, and our aim is to make sure the immigration stops and multiple things can be done here. You cannot do it alone. You need leadership behind. So we make sure that before we go into any village, we need to make sure we have buyership from the local government. They give us letters, which you call them no objection letters, which states that these villages are so remote that there is no plan to set up any kind of microgrid. There is no electricity. There is no grid connection. Please go ahead and we'll support you. So that's a great confidence for our team to go ahead and set up what we are trying to do. As I mentioned to you, nothing is free. So when we set up these microgrids, we make sure we also set up a committee and we do an agreement between us, the villagers, and the local authorities, making sure that the villagers who get these lights, they pay a monthly fees, make sure that they own the grid and they can scale the grid. So after like 5 years, when the battery is gone for a toss, they can easily put in the money and get a new batteries. Or if they have earned over 5 years, not only they change the batteries, but they also scale up the grids and put in TVs. So that is the way we work it. Again, it's very interesting. I was talking to a person and they said, it's very easy to set up a grid, take a 250-watt panel, take a 2 batteries and set it up, but you need to check with the horse how much he can carry. So all our transportation happens through horses, and our grid design is based on how much they can carry. You see the horses carrying over passes and over different terrains, and there's a person carrying a battery to the monastery. Again, this is an expedition which we have been doing for the last 3 years, where people from different countries come together and set up grid in just one day. So this is an example of how we are doing it up. So we make them engineers in one day, let me say, but we also have experts with us so that nothing is spoiled. The wiring is done in a proper manner. Very interestingly, whatever we set up, villagers make sure that they value it. So they put these scarves. It's called kapak, traditional Buddhist silk scarves around it, so that the life of the system goes on. So for them, it's just another life. They know no one is going to come to this villages. So if anything is coming, they need to make sure they maintain it, they value it, and they treat it as their own god. So that is something which is very, very touching for us as a team to do what we are trying to do. Some of these photographs, when the villagers experience light for the first time, right from the bottom joying, dancing, to the person, old man, he never expected that he would see light in his lifetime, playing in front of the LED light. And a ray of hope for most of them, I would say. So just an example, this was the first village we electrified 2 years back. We reached this village in the morning. We did some work on 17th August and 18th August. This is the photograph taken at 7:40 p.m. And you see this another day, next day, just one day, the difference in the lights. So that was a difference. In one day we were able to set up a grid for this village as well. Some of the villages we did last year. This is a village called Umlung. It's in Ladakh again, and it's at 16,000 feet, so very high. And what you see here is a street light on DC and internal LED lights. Till now, our team has electrified 10 villages. Very simple grids, but very, very safe, very, very technologically advanced, very functionally, very operable. And we have impacted directly 2,000 villagers' lives. But again, as I mentioned to you, we don't want to just give light. We are not in the business as a utility, but to promote livelihood. So we promote local handicrafts. There's a lot of woolen, sheep, pashmina goods. So villages which we are electrifying, we are telling the villagers to make handicrafts and use the light to make handicrafts, so their working hours increase, and we create a market linkage for them so that they can earn more from the lights. And once they earn more from these stuff they are producing, they can easily maintain the grid as well. So that's the way we go about it.
Hi,
interestingly, most of the yes.
Hi, Pierce. May I just jump in? I think that's a wonderful place to stop off at, because you're getting to this question of productive uses, but we will need to move on to our next presenter.
Okay.
I think this is a fascinating case study, and please, everyone in the audience, please remember to send your questions in on this presentation. I'm already seeing one person who has called the presentation fantastic, so I think certainly, and here you can see his contact details. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paris. That is a really exciting case study.
Thanks, Molly.
Thank you. So next up, we are going to move to Colin Salingera, and he's going to talk to us quite a bit about islands. So we're going to move from the mountains to the islands again, and he's based in Malawi. So I am just going to request for him to please share his screen with us, and then we will get started in that. And again, wonderful. Thank you so much for all your questions on Julia's presentation and on Paris's presentation. So for sure, I'm assigning these questions as well as we go along, so that some of you may be getting some answers directly to your questions, written answers, or as well we may bring them up in the Q&A at the end. All right, and I see that Colin is here, and I will just take him off mute and let him move forward with his topic here. Thank you so much, Colin. Are you there?
Okay, fine. Thank you. As Amol has already said, I'm based in Malawi and I'm the head of the Department of Energy Studies here at the University. I'm going to talk about the solar wind integration as a solution to enhancing sustainable livelihoods on Likoma Island, based on the research that I did for my PhD. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Colin. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So in the background there, we can see that I've placed Likoma there, which is about 70 kilometers to the nearest inland town in Malawi. And then the ship service, of course, the ship is also odd. It only goes to the island once in a week. And then there are other typical regular boats which are unsafe there. And on the island there are diesel generators which supply electricity for just about 14 hours per day. Okay. In that slide, I'm going to talk about as Likoma Island being remote from the inland, but also how remote is Likoma Island from sustainable livelihoods. So when the diesel is scarce, this is based on what happened in 2012. There was a big scarcity of diesel in Malawi, and particularly to the island due to the logistics. So during that time, communication systems could not work, and because of the diesel scarcity, it means the ship could not operate, and fortunately enough, again also the ship developed a fault. So it means also the other regular boats could not operate, and the water supply on the island could not work, and in the schools it means the students could not study effectively because they could only study at night. So in short, that is apart from the physical remoteness, that also the sustainable livelihoods destroyed that are occurring on the island. And the cost of the diesel, actually the cost of generation is at 0.88 or 88 cents US cents per kilowatt hour, and this requires a huge subsidy because the set tariff here in Malawi is about 8 cents per kilowatt hour based on the generation which occurs on the mainland from hydro. Okay. Now, again, apart from the people who are connected to the grid, which is the diesel, which is supplied by diesel on the island, then we have got other people who cannot afford being connected to the grid due to their condition of being low income, but also the costs associated with the connection to the grid. So that's what they use. They can have those batteries and then use the batteries to power some very small LEDs which are not even bright enough. This again poses another human rights issue, because it means these people, we expect also these people to be able to compete in national exams, but they are in those conditions. So apart from looking at it from energy access point of view, it can also be viewed as a denial of certain human rights. Now, through the research I did, it was found out that with the same cost which is committed to operate the diesel generator for 14 hours, it is possible to supply the former island with electricity for 24 hours if the solar and wind are integrated, and the cost of generation could be reduced from 0.88 cents, from 88 cents per kilowatt hour to 0.441 per kilowatt hour, and the subsidy per kilowatt hour consumed on the island, it means it would go down by almost 56%. And then with that system being implemented, then the island can have 24/7, 365 electricity services, which can have a very greatly significant impact in terms of improving the health, the education, the water supply, and the business sectors on the island, more particularly the sustainable livelihoods for the island. Now, the implementation model that because of the sizing of the system, there will still be some excess energy which would otherwise be curtailed. So the model that is being proposed to implement is that the excess energy should be used to charge and should be used to supply an energy kiosk, where those people who are not connected to the grid, the low income people, can come and charge their solar, let's say solar lanterns there, small batteries which can power their houses, using which they'll be using efficient, let's say light bulbs, LED bulbs, to make sure that they've got quality light. And in short, this implementation model enhances the access to quality energy supply to the low-income houses, while also enhancing utilization of the what would be curtailed energy from the grid-based wind PV diesel system. So in terms of the progress, decision makers are convinced with the solution. Currently, we are in the phase of sourcing financing for the capital cost. The capital cost is about 4 million United States dollars, because the system would be about around 1.2 megawatts to supply the Likoma Island, which has got about 10,000 people. And then right now, I'm working in collaboration with the Electricity Supply Corporation. I'm working in collaboration with the Electricity Supply Corporation of Malawi to implement the system, and we have been very good discussions. Every time they're in touch, we are at this stage, and then maybe we have to do this so that I think thank you.
Thank you so much, Colin. All right, so we'll move on to Ben Campbell, but thank you so much for that, Colin. And there were several questions that came in for you as well, so I think people are quite intrigued about this. And if you'll have a look at those questions and perhaps send some responses to people, or otherwise we'll try to take them up in the Q&A. And I'm just going to move now to Ben Campbell, and he's going to talk to us. He's an anthropologist who works quite a lot in Nepal, and he's working on quite some interesting issues there. And let me just Let me just bring Ben into the conversation now, and I think you all will be quite intrigued with his presentation. Ben, are you there?
Hi, Molly. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, please continue.
Okay. Well, just let me say it's a great pleasure to be here, to be participating in this wonderful event, and I should just admit that my computer system failed abysmally in the last few days, so it's a kind of last-minute presentation that you're getting based on substitute technologies. So I'm going to take you back to the Himalayas after Paris's great talk from Ladakh. So a bit further east and south is Nepal, and I'm going to talk about a site where I've been working for actually over 20 years in northern Nepal. Remoteness up there, I would say, I'm speaking as an anthropologist, remoteness is a kind of double-edged phenomenon. Because on one hand, in remote places, local communities are well used to being resilient, adaptable, and they have solidarity amongst themselves. And they know they need to get by, they need to cope internally and with the help of their neighbors. On the other hand, the other edge of remoteness is a certain amount of isolation and neglect from the center. So that's just a brief sort of introduction to the case that I'm going to be talking about. But the consequence is that when we have renewable energy technologies, or in fact any other kind of development intervention, remoteness comes in not simply as to do with geography and distance. It's also to do about socio-economic and cultural remoteness coming into the equation as well. So one has to understand from remote places, people can have the sense of them being excluded from generalized development benefits from mainstream society, and also they may indeed have a sense of being treated not as equal citizens with a right to development support. Now, as a positive aspect of remoteness has been the incredible success of community forestry management, and I think we're seeing in the energy field similar kinds of community-based responses to energy issues. Well, that's great. Now, communities are not always able to operate for natural resource management when the state comes along and institutes things like protected areas, like national parks, for instance. So what I'm talking about is an area in Nepal which is in the Langtang National Park, north of Kathmandu, heading up to the Chinese-Tibetan border. Now, in this area there are big mountains, and people rely significantly on selling milk for the making of the yak cheese, the famous yak cheese that's up there. Now they do this in off-grid locations where there are seasonal dairying units. Here you can see the main cheese factory, as it's called, that was built around 1970. And in fact, the value of the cheese that it produces over 1 year is equivalent to, roughly in US dollars, about $150,000. So that's money coming in, very important income for a number of village development committees in the district. And in fact, across other districts too, people, in fact, even walk about 4 hours one way to deliver the household milk supply from the yak cow hybrids. So this is a quote from an article I co-wrote with my collaborator Paul Silas, the engineer from Newcastle University, and we went together to look at implementing a biogas unit to replace the use of wood fuel for pasteurizing the milk and making the cheese, okay? Because the national park is saying, look, you can't any longer use wood fuel for making the yak cheese. So what's interesting is that at the higher altitude of roughly 10,500 feet, the biogas struggles a bit to produce the gas. So we've come across hybrid solutions. Now, in the background of this photograph, you can see a tank containing water from a passive thermal heater, and also, like we also heard from the Ladakh presentation, we need to consider the beast of burden that carry goods and equipment up to these off-grid locations. Here is the male offspring of a yak father and cow mother. Here's the support in the capital, in Kathmandu, some days travel away, the biogas support program, who helped us get started. There's the operation of the cheese factory using wood fuel currently to pasteurize the milk. There's loads of dung. So we've got this wonderful potential fuel to feed into the biogas digester. With this idea of building in the additional passive solar water heating, we think we can, with a trial anaerobic unit, see if we can't in fact get enough gas to make the cheese. Here we see the piping coil being put in at the base of the concrete anaerobic digester. The inner surface, inner coating of the digester unit, and there's the dome over the top with the piping coming out. Then we have the earthquake. It was a terrible disaster. We've heard about the cyclones in the Pacific. Here in the Himalayas, it's earthquake prone. We had a terrible earthquake in April last year. This was at the local military camp. Some damage was done to the cheese factory, and right now there's a test being done on the concrete integrity of our biogas unit, and we hope that in the next month we'll start for the first time feeding in the yak and cow dung into the digester to see if we can get the methane. And if this is successful, then we can expand, build a bigger unit, and potentially cover the processing of about 200 litres of milk per day at this place. So here's the happy gentleman who's managing the cheese factory there beside the water heater unit. And the conclusion I want to come to is to talk about the old power relations that these Tamang-speaking communities in northern Nepal have suffered as a result of the remoteness, but there's a struggle and a current interest in renewable technologies as a way to make them kind of more equal citizens in the new society in Nepal after the Civil War experience. So effectively, citizen participation and greater democracy are very important elements more generally for achieving sustainability goals. Thank you. That's the end of the presentation.
Thanks so much, Ben. That is so very interesting. And please, everyone who's listening to the presentation, please do send in your questions. So I see that our last presenter, Stuart Crane, who is actually on a remote island at the moment, is not able to join us today. So we're going to move directly into some Q&A, if that's all right for you all. I thought I would go through the presenters one by one, asking them each one question, and then we'll come back around if we have a little bit more time and continue with another question for everyone, so that way we will hopefully answer most of them. And a lot of you are probably receiving answers as well through our Q&A system. So if you have a specific question, even if it's a small point, please send that in to our speakers and they will write back to you directly. Wonderful. So all right, so let's just start with a first question, and this one is for Julia. So Julia, I'm going to take you off mute here. And so the first question, you've probably already seen it, is coming from Dean Cooper. And the question for Julia, this is a great example. Did you consider any additional renewable energy sources? E.g. wind or bioenergy? What is the lifetime of the batteries? Have replacement costs been taken into account? So these are quite a few different questions here. And Julia, I imagine you have that in front of you there. Are you able to see the question?
Yes, I do, and I can see the question. Okay, well, I'll start with the renewable energy sources. We did, in the initial stages, consider other renewable energy sources. Wind turned out to be not feasible just because of the extreme remoteness and the difficulties of maintaining a turbine out there, as well as the fact that there's not really any equipment that you could use to build the turbine. So that was just ruled out as being too difficult and too complicated. bioenergy is actually being trialled on a different scale. So there are some bioenergy digesters being trialled on 2 of the islands at the moment, and those are family-size piggery digesters. And the idea of that is that they will produce gas for cooking, because gas is by far the most popular fuel for cooking on the islands. So that is also happening sort of in parallel with the solar project. So I hope that sort of covers that question. The batteries have a nominal lifetime of 12 years. We're not expecting them to last quite that long just because of the hot environment, so we're expecting 8 to 10 years. And yes, the replacement costs have been factored into the overall project, and the utility is theoretically putting aside money each year to do the battery replacement after 8 years. Whether or not they actually stick to it is always a bit of a difficult question. So the financial model, cost for local operators, service and maintenance, etc., is factored into the overall cost of electricity, and those mostly remain, so the costs for local operators remain much the same, because the utility wants to employ the same number of operators on each island, and that's also a social issue about providing employment. Replacement parts, those things all have been factored into the overall cost of energy, and there is supposed to be, as I mentioned, a sinking fund being kept aside for spare parts over the long term. So we hope that they do stick to that, and we hope that it doesn't become a problem where they come back for additional grant funding in the future, but that does sometimes happen.
Okay. Is that all right, Julia? That's great. We can come back around to you, and I'll just move forward with the next question, if that's all right.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So the next question is for Paris Lumba. Let me see. So the first question we have for Paris, what does Paris regard as the top 3 constraints to scaling? Paris?
Oh, okay. I think I did answer that privately, but I will love to repeat that again. I think the communication is a big challenge. Even if I have to set up as a to monitor these 30 microgrids which we have set up, it's snowing, the line gets cut. It's not an easy place to work in. So it's the communication is an issue. There has been a lot of climate change issues in the last couple of years. So it's been raining and the bridges get drowned and broken down. That's one more issue, and again the window of operation is very, very less. So I'm currently in Delhi now, but I should be in Ladakh. But the villages which we have to set up this year, the passes are blocked by snow, so I cannot go now. So we just operate in the 6 months which we have. So some of the things which is the constraint to us.
Okay, great. Thank you, Paris. So I will ask now a question of Colin. So Colin, the first question that we had for you was about, wait, let me just find here. Okay. There has been some work done on Likoma Island on establishing a solar system under the ACP EU Energy Facility. And how would this system integrate what has been done?
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead and answer.
Hello, Margaret.
Hello, Colin.
Yes, you are talking about what has been done. Ideally, the system, it has been, it's about the research has been completed. It was a model. We have done we did the feasibility study whereby I interviewed people. We got the demand profiles from the operator, and factored in some sort of future energy demand, and did the model based on OMA. That's where the results were coming from. Now these results have been shared with the government people and the Electricity Supply Corporation of Malawi, and that is where we are moving on from that. So okay, we have to source funding for the implementation, and there are already some investors from the US who are pushing to make sure that the system is implemented.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Thank you for answering that question. I'm now going to ask a question of Ben Campbell that came in while he was speaking. So I'll just take you off mute there, Ben. And Ben, one of the questions that we had come in is from Paul Rugambwa. What's the cost of the biogas digester per household, and how affordable to communities?
Okay, that's a good question. The unit we're looking at is for the cheese factory. So that's going to be, you know, for the cheese factory, which is part of the Ministry of Agriculture, for it to use. So the cost of the trial digester unit is roughly, I think at last count, because one has all the transport and extra factors, and now we've got the repairs from the earthquake, it's around $3,000 so far. And of course, for domestic scale, it would be a fair bit cheaper. And the subsidy, I think, is a roughly 50% subsidy is available through the biogas support program down in Kathmandu.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Ben. If you all would care to stay on for a few more minutes, we'll do another round of Q&A since there does seem to be quite a lot of interest. I'm just going to return back to Julia now for another question that has come in. A question to Julia McDonald. Do you include capacity development trainings of the local personnel for the operation and maintenance of the system that you install? So Julia, please answer that.
Yep. There is capacity development and training included, and that goes all the way through the construction period and then afterwards as well. It is a difficult issue in the remote islands, just because in general there are very few people with any technical skills. And it's something that I've discussed a lot with the utilities in the islands, and it is an ongoing issue for them. So part of the problem is that once they do have someone who is trained to a higher level, very often that person will actually want to leave the outer island and go to the main island where there are more, I suppose, opportunities and challenges for them. So they quite frequently find that they have a high turnover of staff on the outer islands as staff get trained up better. So it's a very difficult issue and really one that is able to be solved. So at the moment in Tuvalu, the way that they're running it is having basic tasks for the operators on the outer islands, and then with technical support from the main island when they need it. There are other people trialling different systems in other islands, but yeah, it's definitely an ongoing issue.
Okay, thanks.
So I can't really definitively answer that, like what the solution to that is, but definitely there is capacity building being done. It just takes some time for that to happen.
Okay, great. No, that's really useful. That's really useful to know. Thanks so much. And now I'm just going to go back around to Paris, ask him another question. So we have another question here. And it's kind of, again, on this same topic that was being asked of Julia about how do you deal with providing maintenance and expertise for small repairs. And there was a similar question about whether you return to areas for monitoring or maintenance purposes after you have lit up the area. So Paris, if you could please respond to that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two ways of looking at how we do it. Our charge controllers have an onboard logging. So we log the data for uptime and downtime of a grid, so we know when the grid has gone down or when it has come up. That's one thing. Secondly, every time when we install in a village, for every 5 villages we have one person who is from that area and who's trained to kind of look at issues in terms of transportation of bulbs if it gets burned, or charge control if they get burned. We have a small service showroom in the main city, which is the center of these villages. so which has the inventory. So of course, I mean, the whole objective is to make sure that these grids and these villages are lit up not only for years, but also they scale up on their own. To give an example, the village which we electrified in 2014, we just put up LED lights. After 1.5 years, the villagers from that village itself, they came to our service center and asked, and actually bought 3 DC LED TVs last year. So we did earn from it as well, because they earned it as well. So it's not only maintenance, but we're also scaling those grids up, the ones which we have installed.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Paris. All right.
Okay.
I have a question for Colin now. And yes, okay, so this is coming from Adizoyin Adeleke, and she says, I am doing research on the management of photovoltaic systems in Nigeria. Many PV systems for rural electrification fail in Nigeria in 2 to 3 years of installation. And she says she believes the problem is not just maintenance, but also due to various omissions in the project life cycles. So in view of addressing this challenge, she intends to assess every stage of a PV project life cycle of PV projects in Nigeria. So she was saying, as I will be looking at 6 case studies, all in different geopolitical zones of Nigeria, could you please kindly suggest organizations that might be interested in this type of work? Colin, is this something that you're kind of thinking about as well? Are you kind of aware of this kind of work and the fact that so many of them are failing within 2 or 3 years of installation? What do you think the problem is?
I think I should first of all agree with this observation that most systems fail a few years after installation, but because here in Malawi we have also had similar cases, and these are the issues which are affecting the diffusion and adoption of renewable energy technology, more particularly at a large scale in the developing countries. However, the key issues that result in the failure, it's about the quality assurance. What I've observed is that in most developing countries, there are no strict regulatory requirements in as far as the testing and validating the quality of the products that are coming into the country is concerned. So we discover that there are lots of fake products coming into the country, more particularly batteries. So what is claimed on the data sheet may not be what the component would be able to deliver, one. And this is also exacerbated by the lack of good designing team. So you discover that most of the people, they don't go into the details of doing the load assessment, how much current would be flowing that can affect the battery, because the batteries, I think people would agree with me that most of the systems that are failing, it's because of the batteries. And this is the part which gives most people problems in designing. The panels would last, the regulators would last, but when it comes to the batteries, sometimes maybe even after a year, they fail. Inverters may fail, but not regular, but it's because of the quality assurance issue. To say, when the products are coming into Malawi, into our countries, or whether in Nigeria, Malawi, or whatsoever, do we have robust quality assurance techniques to make sure that the products that we are getting, they are the right ones? I think that's the main issue that people have to be concerned with. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you so much. Actually, great news, everyone. If you can stick around a few more minutes, Stuart Crane, who is the director of the managing director of Village Infrastructure and Angels, has been able to eventually connect from his remote island. So again, we see some of the challenges for remote islands, and we're very pleased to have Stuart here. So I'm just going to share his screen. That'll take just a moment, and let me just bring him off of mute. All right, Stuart, you should be able to begin when you're ready, and we're so pleased that you're able to join us. Hi, Stuart. Are you on the line?
G'day, everybody. My apologies. I took so long to get connected.
That is just fine, Stuart. We were just
Can you
talking
hear me
about.
okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. We were just talking about the challenges for remote areas, and this is exactly
Hello.
one of them. Yeah, we hear you, Stuart. Thank you.
Great stuff. Excellent. So yes, indeed, we've had some interesting challenges here with the internet connectivity. Some of us are still on dial-up.
No problem.
So
would you like me to share your
thank you very much for the opportunity to present here. And we've got some materials available. Sorry, Molly, I interrupted you there, I think.
No, that's fine. That's fine. There are some delays here, again, due to remoteness. So if you do want me to share your presentation, just let me know. Otherwise, I have made you the presenter, so you should be able to share your screen. Stuart, do we still have you there?
Yes, I have the presentation coming up just now, and hopefully you're able to see it no problem.
All right, I don't think that's up on our screen
just now.
Okay.
And should have the first slide there now. Share my screen. You getting that?
It'll probably come through in just a second. If it doesn't, that's okay. We'd just love to hear kind of your story and about your work. So if the slides don't come up, don't worry about it. You can go ahead and begin just talking to us, and then because I think your story is very interesting. Apologies, everyone. I think we are having some connectivity issues. He has, he's on a very limited connection that is more like dial-up rather than broadband. I'm sure we all know the feeling of that. If he does come back in the next minute or so, we will go forward with his presentation. But thank you all for coming today. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your understanding about these types of technical issues that can happen. And as I did say, it's quite apropos that this happens during a webinar on remoteness and energy. Yeah, Stuart, are you still there? Well, he seems to be online, but I can't currently hear him, so we may have lost that audio connection with Stuart. So let's just see. Why don't we, until Stuart comes back, take perhaps another question, and we'll see if we get that audio connection back with Stuart. Okay. So let me ask a question that actually I'm pretty sure it came through. It came through to Ben. Let me see. It was quite interesting. Okay. All right, so it's a question to all, but especially to Ben Campbell. The various complexities you've observed make gathering, integrating, and comparing data on the SDGs quite a challenge. How do you interface your knowledge with data analysts, national statistical departments, and agencies? And let me just unmute Ben so that he can answer that question. Ben?
Yeah, fantastic question, to which the answer is with considerable difficulty. You'll understand that my approach is as an anthropologist and an ethnographer of renewable energy systems. So we are essentially looking for difference rather than assuming data is straightforwardly integrated. So once my case study is of a longer life cycle duration, once we actually know whether we can get the biogas generation working, etc., what the inputs are of the feedstock, etc., and all this kind of stuff, then indeed it will be brilliant to be able to compare with national level data and comparable situations where complexities could then be seen as a factor of remoteness that could be understood in relation to their particular localities, but also as a factor of remoteness from centres, from easy access to sources of support and maintenance and all sorts of other capacity factors.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Ben. I think eventually the connection with Stuart is not working, so I think we will probably wrap up here. So I just want to thank you all for attending today. Thank you so much for your interest in this topic. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a series of webinars. We would love to have your input on what types of topics you would like to see us cover next. We'd like to know if you were happy with the format today. If there's anything that we can improve, there's going to be a little survey that you'll see at the end of the webinar. And as well, we'll send a follow-up message with this as a recording so that you all can share it with colleagues, or you can go back and listen to some of the points that you thought were especially interesting. Yeah, and please have a look at our handouts and as well at the websites of Smart Villages, which is www.e4sv.org, and as well LCEDN, and that's www.lcedn.com. And we'd be pleased to stay in touch with all of you. Thank you so much for making this such a successful webinar, and thank you so much for all of your questions. And I will just say thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Molly.
Thank you.
Okay, hope to do it again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Molly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks to everyone. Bye-bye.